Great. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this second part of the session where we're going to talk about an overview of how to make a contribution and share data through FaceBase. Uh, so um, that's contributions of data to FaceBase. Um, in this, I'll give a overview of the process and then just a brief review of what we have available to help with data management and sharing plans. This is primarily just to help you know what resources exist on the FaceBase website. And then the bulk of this time will be Alejandro giving us a live demonstration of uploading a data set and describing it in the system. So with that, let's see, can I share my screen, Chris?
Yes.
All right. All right. So, first of all, we would just like to say that we think FaceBase can be a great venue to share your data, especially um, if your data is in the dental, oral, craniofacial, and even related, biologically related research areas. So, as I mentioned before, FaceBase began with a more narrow focus, but that was quite a few years ago, and FaceBase has really expanded to encouraging data contributions that are really of general relevance and concern throughout the whole of the DOC, dental, oral, craniofacial, and even biologically related um, research. And again, as I've mentioned before, we have both human and animal model data. So we really like to emphasize that not only does FaceBase have this large collection of data on mouse and zebrafish, but we also have human subjects data, and we are capable of having controlled access data. So you can actually direct your human subjects sequencing data or imaging data to FaceBase to meet your data sharing requirements. And we are approved to handle that data. FaceBase has a broad collection in terms of the experiment types and imaging modalities. So we spanned most types of imaging and microscopy, as well as sequencing data types. So everything from bulk RNA-seq to single cell, single nucleotide um, 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 sequencing data. Um, to nucleus to other experiment types as well. We have data on tooth enamel and tooth development, for example, and um, data sets that cover public health related. So let's say surveys and other questionnaire types of data. So we have structured data like that also in FaceBase. There's really a broad types of data. It just really needs to fit within the general scientific interest within DOC and closely related fields. Clearly, it satisfies data sharing requirements. If you go to the NIH site on data sharing, the NIDCR recommends FaceBase for most types of relevant data that's sponsored through them. And in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, you'll also notice that we have this logo for the Core Trust Seal. So this is an independent certification process that we went through that looks at essentially our operating procedures, our technology, and certifies that we follow a lot of the best practices in managing research data. So to start a data submission to FaceBase, you actually begin by filling out a short questionnaire on the FaceBase site. I think Chris showed how to get to this. I have a couple links here. They're also available from the homepage of FaceBase. And you just give an overview of your data and your research. You might include an abstract from your research proposal, or maybe from the paper that your data is associated with. to give us an idea of what the science behind the data is. And then it's reviewed by the FaceBase Steering Committee, which consists of both staff members of FaceBase as well as our NIH, some members of our NIH program staff as well. And typically, when things are operating as normal, the response gets back to you within about 2 weeks. And this is usually just to make sure the data is within scope and that there aren't any red flags. And those would typically be things of, say, human subjects related data that we're not sure has been consented properly for sharing. And so we might have questions about that. Now, if it's a data that's been funded by NIH or similar funding agencies, then that's usually never, there usually aren't those kind of concerns, but we might have some questions during this process. And then once the data has been okayed for data submission, we typically encourage you to start off with a one-on-one tutorial with us. And actually what Alejandro's going to go through today is very much similar to what we do in a one-on-one setting. So if you've attended this, you don't really need that so much, but it's still good to kind of talk about what data you're submitting and maybe give you some tips about how you might go about doing it most efficiently and save yourself time. We have online forms as seen here in the upper left for describing the experiments and biosamples, and then you can either upload directly through the browser, or we have an upload tool where you can, if you have a large amount of files, where you can run basically a batch process and upload large amounts of data, and it'll do things like retries if there are any network failures in the middle. There are some automated quality control as well as our own internal expert quality control, as I said, along with those of us on the technical and operations side of the FaceBase consortium. There's also we have craniofacial biologists who review things, and they might have some tips or some thoughts on how to better describe a data set. And then if you're preparing a manuscript, we strongly advise and request that you include those official citations to your own data set within your own manuscript. So in your, say, data availability statement, use the proper digital object identifiers and ways to cite the data, so that when your publication goes out, it'll have all the links to your data set on FaceBase. And then finally, we either release it, or if you request for the data to be embargoed, this is very typical if you're preparing a manuscript and you're not sure when it's really going to go to press, you'll want the data set to come out no sooner than your publication, or basically synchronized with it. And we have facilities to do that, and so we can make sure that your data remains private to only you and your team until your publication is going out. Okay, and then again, just a reminder here that the structure of data within FaceBase is around describing a few core concepts, beginning with the project. That's the group contributing data, data sets, which are really arbitrary collections of data and metadata. I say arbitrary, in other words, you can define yourself what makes sense. A certain cohort of patients, a certain condition of your overall study you want to release as a specific data set, or maybe all of it together. You have those options. Then you describe the experiments, the procedures that were done in the overall study. So what were the assay types, what protocols, and then describe your biosamples, giving a few key details. This is about a half a dozen or so attributes of the biological characteristics that were involved in your study, and then upload your files. Again, the data set has at the top a attribution information like the project that produced it, the individual contributors. This is important for going into the citation data. All data sets get a digital object identifier, so you have a formal long-term reference. If you have any other information or prior data sets that were released in Geo or dbGaP or other locations, you can cross-reference those. And then you tag your data set with controlled standardized terminology. We also encourage, if you have data available for online visualization, to make that available in FaceBase too. So primarily we're looking for your let's call it somewhat raw. Sometimes people use the term raw or the acquired scientific data. We don't just want figures or tables. We want actual imaging data or sequencing data. But if you also have, like, if you generated surface models, those are great to share through FaceBase. Or for, say, single cell data, if you have the like a Seurat R data set, or a barcode and matrix files and whatnot, um, making those available will allow us to provide online visualization with your data. And then for other imaging data, we can actually generate the previews for your data set. As I mentioned, sharing and citing is a key part of FaceBase, so it's important to at least start your process while your manuscript is in preparation, and that way you can have formal citations that you can include with your paper, and again, you can embargo your data set so that it comes out with your publication. So don't be hesitant to start early in the process. It doesn't mean at all that your data will be publicly accessible. We can time that with your publication. And then just finally, a few tips to keep in mind. Review our metadata and data guidelines early, and Alejandro will be showing you where those docs are at. Schedule a one-on-one with us. Well, this really happens after you've filled out that form that I mentioned at the beginning about, just telling us about your data set, and then we review and we get back to you. Almost always, we're going to accept your data, or we're just going to have some questions that need clarifying. But start off with a brief one-on-one with us to go over your data set, so we can kind of help you strategize how to make it easier for you. And then even if you want to submit part of your data set and have us review it during the process,